All right, sorry about that. Cleaning my camera, getting the oil off the lens. Um, so this one is probably gonna be more controversial than the past religious debate live streams, just by the nature of it. I am gonna try to keep it respectful though. As long as trolls don't come in here being silly, because my standing rule is, I have no mercy on trolls. When it comes to trolls, let me see, what is this? Oh. Yeah, when it comes to trolls, I treat them like Cobra Kai. Strike hard, strike first, strike hard, no mercy. I don't. If so, if someone comes in here and they're a troll, I really don't care what they are. I am going to mercilessly roast them, mercilessly, because if you didn't want to get roasted, you shouldn't have trolled. So I love when these trolls try to play the victim when I when I insult them, because like I said, I have no mercy for trolls. So just letting people know as they enter the live stream that when it comes to trolls, I will be like Cobra Kai. Strike first, strike hard, no mercy. But beyond that, I want to make this live fairly respectful. Just because we're talking about um, a religious minority, at least here in America, they're a religious minority, although they're not overseas. But because of that and the perceived political uh, the political implications, I want to, try to be nice. But again, if I do get some trolls from that religious community, I will roast them. Just saying. I will. don't don't roast. I mean, don't troll. You won't get roasted. Seems like that should be common sense. But most trolls aren't that bright. So, let me switch some things on here. All right, so this live stream is publicly visible, and I had to switch on my monetization, which I thought I did earlier, but whatever. But we are live, and this is another one of my religious discussions. Uh, Thank you, Benny2755, for the gem, for the GIF. Well, for the gift. Sorry. Um, so the topic du jour is another religious debate, which I've been doing for the past 2 weeks, and this topic is Islam inherently violent? So this should be interesting. Hopefully, I will get some people who actually respond in the chat room to give me their views on this. I am I am of a mixed mind on this discussion, but welcome to everyone coming into the chat room. So again, my topic in this live stream is Islam inherently violent? And I have a nuanced view of this. It's for me, it's not simply yes or no. And since it's not like uh, I'm pressured to take one to, since I'm not pressured to have a definitive stance on it, I'm I don't see why I have to say simply yes or no. It will be a nuanced answer, which is not gonna, well, it it will still probably upset some people, which is a given. But if you're not upsetting someone, you're doing it wrongly. So, well, that's what they say, right? um, I don't like the I don't like the lighting. Oh, I might change that. Um, so water. Cowgirl, Wyoming says you need a cat. I do have a cat. As a matter of fact, I've put my cat in several of my short videos, my YouTube shorts. Yeah, we're not talking about Jesus today, so well, not directly anyway. This again, the discussion is Islam inherently violent? And as much as I would like to just say no, I can't because I would be intellectually dishonest if I simply said no, it's not. Yeah, Paul, you're evangelizing to the wrong person. Just no. I don't. Some of you really need medication. Like, why do you come on a live stream being evangelicals? Like, who is that? To whom is that supposed to actually appeal? I'm just saying, because think about it. If I already believe, then what's the point of proselytizing to me? If I don't already believe, what do you think you putting these in the chat room is going to actually make me believe? Either way, it's a waste of time. It really is. So, and I'm not trying to be mean, and I don't have anything against your beliefs, but don't come in my chat room proselytizing on something that is not the subject of of my live stream. I'm not talking about Jesus Christ today. You had your chance when I did those live streams. Where were you then, uh, Paul W. McNutt, which is I know is a fake fucking name, but yeah, when I was doing my previous live streams days ago and last week, centering on questions about Christianity and Western religion in general, where were you then? I hate you motherfuckers when you come into my fucking live stream talking some Jesus Christ bullshit on a fucking live stream that got nothing to do with Christianity. And then when I actually set out to make live streams talking about Christianity, none of you motherfuckers shut up. So shut the fuck up, get the fuck off my channel, and go suck a fucking dick. Ugh, fucking, I hate retarded ass fucking people. Anyway, sorry for that. Now back to the program. So the thing is, again, it's not simply yes and not simply no. Obviously, it's not a no because we just have too much hard evidence that there are violent folks within that faith. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, to say it's inherently violent would be to ignore its roots with other Western religions that share the same violent past. So, you know, during the Middle Ages, Christianity was just as violent. um, Judaism was had its violent streak, not so much in the Middle Ages, but more during antiquity. I think they were the first to sort of shed their rough-hewn, violent behavior, and then it was mostly hashed out with the Christians and Muslims, which back then I think were called Mohammedans or whatever. Um, and pretty much every nasty stereotype you have of this of Islam today, you could have accused Christendom of during the Middle Ages. The conquest, the the radical faith, the um, grabbing of territory through conquest and war, the subjugation of women, um, the taking of slaves, uh, the brutal uh, brutal punishment of heretics, the the very um, harsh codes of law, just like because we talk about Sharia today, but Christianity had its era in the Middle Ages, which was just as rough as Sharia, if not worse. And you had the Crusades. There were no heroes in the Crusade. I don't know. There were. It's hard to say that, but it seemed like there was no hero during the Crusades. I guess during well, I guess during specific Crusades because there were like four of them, I believe. It fell into like four waves. Um, but over that whole course of history of religious wars, there was not really there was not they were there were heroes and villains on both sides. I'll put it that way. And I guess the Crusades was actually a good thing for medieval Europe because it was falling apart through internal strife and ceaseless war over limited resources amongst land barons who needed to be like held in check by their kings. And although there was a holy Roman Empire, as the common quip was, it was not holy, it was not Roman, and it wasn't an empire. Meanwhile, in the in Eastern Christianity, Eastern Orthodox, um, that part of the Roman Empire became the Byzantine Empire, and it actually did hold sway throughout most of the Middle Ages until it was, uh, conquered by the Ottoman Turks. So, but why am I going all the way back in history? That was just to say that I, I um, that I can't. I'm not sure whether I would call Islam inherently violent, since, like I said, its violent roots it shared with the other major Western religions of the time. What I think is different today is that Christianity has largely lost its um, its but not in all cases though. But modern day Christianity has largely lost much of its warlike elements. It evolved with the times, and I think medieval, whereas I think Islam is still stuck in that same era. So that's where I am with it. Um, like I said, I would like more feedback and not simply people like this, not simply people coming in here to proselytize, but people who actually want to share an opinion. And I'm not gonna look. I'm because this is a sensitive topic, and I know people have strong opinions on it. I am not gonna fry anyone for having the so-called wrong opinion. I'm only gonna fry people who come in here trolling. That's it. If you're giving a sincere opinion, whether I find it an informed opinion or not, I'm not gonna hold that against anyone. I just don't like trolls. That's the only thing I'm against. So if someone comes in here proselytizing when what they're proselytizing about has nothing to do with the context of the stream, then yeah, I'm going to say something. Usually I just ignore it, but when people do that relentlessly, it gets annoying. And what set me off 5 minutes ago was that I've been literally holding these religious discussions for 2 weeks. So when the guy came in proselytizing about Jesus, he had his chance days ago when I was actually talking about that, about Christianity specifically. He could have came and chimed in with his opinions on Christ and on Christianity, and he didn't. But he came to interrupt a stream that has nothing to do with that. And to me, I found that extremely annoying. So when I find something extremely annoying because I know the person could could have chose otherwise, I will I will I will put them on blast. So Paul McNutt, whatever the fuck his fake ass username is, if he wants to come back and actually join in on the discussion, he's more than welcome to. But if he come in here proselytizing again, I'm just gonna fry him again and probably block him. As far as someone asking me about a shout out, no. If you want a shout out, drop a super chat or drop a gift. I'm not doing free shout outs. Fuck you. No other stream, none of the other major streamers will even acknowledge your presence unless you did drop drop some money. And even then, half the time they don't, depending on the size of the gift. I'm not like that. If you drop 25 cents, I'll shout you out. But you're not going to ask me for favors, and you're not going to drop something in the stream. That's how live streams work. Like you even, I'm not trying to sound cocky, but frankly, you're even lucky that I even acknowledge something at all when the comments aren't being followed with dollar signs. Because like I said, in any other major streamers live streams, they don't really pay attention to the people who just drop comments that aren't putting it behind dollar signs. So I do, but I'm not giving shout outs. I'm not doing birthdays. I'm not giving advice unless you drop in a super chat. Plain and simple. There are my other live streams, my Ask Me Anything days, where I will, you know, be a little bit more flexible. But again, on my Ask Me Anything days, I haven't seen people. So again, don't come in here on days where it's not Ask Me Anything, asking for all this stuff for free. And that being that I've been doing these religious discussions for 2 weeks because I always have people coming into the stream offering religious opinions when the topic is never about anything religious. I decided for these past 2 weeks, let me just frankly talk about religious ideas and opinions. And to my chagrin, no one has, except for a few really, except for a few uh, previous streams, not too many people have participated. It could be the time of day. I don't know. I don't care. Because again, if I wasn't giving a religious discussion, then I would have these very same people who aren't participating right now coming into the stream. But then when I actually do put on a topic that should be of their interest, they're not participating. So once I stop So once I decide to move on from these religious discussions, and I see those very same people coming back into my chat room giving religious opinions when they had over 2 weeks to do so, I'm going to ignore the fuck out of them and fry them, or fry them, because they had their chance in all those previous streams. So, anywho, um, so again, so getting back to whether Islam is inherently violent, it would be disingenuous to say there's not something about the 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 doctrines of Islam that don't foster people to be violent. Now, you know, your average American Muslim isn't violent, and I think that's largely and but I think that's mainly due to the stringent immigration processes that we have here. That they're not. Europe's uh, policies are less stringent than America. That's why you have more radical Islamists in Europe than in America, because we have a lot, we have a lot more we have a lot more checks on who comes here from where, especially during the Trump administration. He has put a lot more of break stops on on which countries are allowed to um, send people here as immigrants, or even as visitors, and even out the countries in which we do allow people. There's still, some pretty tough processes people have to go through to legally immigrate here. So again, that's why we have less radical Islamists here than in Europe. However, money talks, and sometimes radical Islamists get here through um, just through the ability to pay to be here. So, like the Bin Laden family, they were a very wealthy family with connections to the Bush family. That's how they were able to be here. Although supposedly they did not agree with um, Osama bin Laden, which is part of their family. And well, we're not going to rehash 2001 again, but if they didn't have strong um, business connections with the Bush family and were wealthy, very super wealthy themselves, I doubt they would have been allowed to be here. Um, but yeah, but again, like I said, it's hard to deny that there's something about the faith that either either radicalizes people or attracts people who are already radicalized. And I don't know which way the causal arrow goes with that, but or if it's a arrow that goes both ways. Not, and I don't mean it that way. Um, a bidirectional arrow, which means it can be both attracting people who who are disposed to embracing radical ideologies, and also it could be a radicalizing tool itself, the faith. Um, I think is if, if I were to guess on that, I think it is sort of a bi-directional arrow that it both attracts people who are disposed to radical beliefs, and it also further radicalizes people as well, particularly in North Africa and the Middle East. And like I said, I think Europe being less, particularly Western Europe being less discriminating, allowed those sort of folks into their countries where we aren't. America's more selective in whom they allow into into their borders, but we don't catch everything, obviously. We've seen a number of shootings and bombings related to people um, of Islamic faith in the you know these past few weeks or whenever. And I mean, we just had those people protesting against Mayor Mandani, because originally they CNN lied and said that the that the ISIS related terrorists at that protest were trying to were going after Mandani, and that wasn't true. They were going after the protesters who were anti Mayor Mandani and literally shouted out Allah Akbar as they tried to uh, blow up the protesters with a homemade bomb. Okay. Um, and I've told this story a long time ago. I mean, a number of times. So I'm gonna tell it again, since you know different people are on my streams or watching these replays of these broadcasts. And so I had a Persian friend. She was a little, yeah, she was a little Iranian baddie. um, and she and I were flirting with each other. Um, I was considering dating her at the time, and I told her, I wanted a tattoo, but I didn't know what I wanted. I was like, I think I want my name written in maybe Arabic or something like that. And I was like, could you, can you write it out? And she was like, well, we do. And she was like, well, we're Persian. We speak and write Farsi, which is similar to Arabic. I was like, oh, okay. And you know, she um, she had her mother help her, and she actually had her mother well, transliterate my name into Farsi. Like, she knew how to write it herself, but she asked her mom just to make sure she was doing it correctly, which that was really cool that she actually had her mom actually help her out to make sure she was doing it correctly. And I was like, all right, so I'm gonna get a tattoo. And she was like, she was really like pleased. She's like, oh my god. She was like, that's such an honor that you would get your name tattooed based on my, my transliteration of your name. I was like, yeah, because I was like, I just want something different. I was like, I don't want my name just written in English on my name. I mean, on my arm, because like that's so basic. Like, why do I need my name written in English? I already know how to write my name in English. Like, so as Farsi would be really cool. And so we was like, all right, well, we're gonna go tomorrow. And so we were gonna go together to this tattoo parlor and have it done. Uh, Unfortunately, that next day that we were going to do it was September 11th, 2001. We saw the bombs. Like, I mean, like, that's a whole different story. Is like how I was on my way to school that day. I mean, to my classes that day, and We saw the two towers taken down. We saw the Pentagon struck. Then we saw the third plane taken down in Pennsylvania, which, according to a friend who was just started working in the Pentagon at that time, said that third plane was actually headed for the White House. So take that for what it is. But they had definitely tried to take out both our economic and our political capital. So, and anyway, so we both wisely decided, yeah, we shouldn't go get the tattoo done today. Now she even said her mother was saying it would have been a bad idea to do that as well because there probably would have been a lot of anti-Muslim or anti-Arabic fervor going on because of the attacks. And boy, were we right because that next 10 years, mm, 10 years, yeah, I will say that next 5 years, there was all that anti-Arabic, anti-Muslim fervor going on in America. It got very jingoistic at times. Um, but yeah, we decided not to do that, and she she for her part, she was a moderate Muslim because I mean she didn't wear a burqa, she didn't wear a hijab. I didn't even know she was Persian until she told me because when we were in class together, I used to see her and she would just smile at me sometimes. I thought she was I thought she was Latina because you wouldn't have known uh, off the bat that she was Persian, but she did have the olive complexion, the curly black hair, the these very um I don't know how to describe her eyes. Her eyes look like how when you're looking at the Egyptian hieroglyphs, how the people's eyes are made to look. That was the like shape of her eyes, like in the hieroglyphs. She was exceptionally beautiful, and I ended up, you know, hooking up with one of my homeboys because I wanted her Spanish friend, and that didn't exactly work out. So I was kind of like, damn, I should have picked her. But anyway, that's another subject. But like I said, she was a moderate Muslim. Um, she drank. uh, she had sex, obviously. Um, she would do she was teaching me how to do criminal stuff, which is funny because our family was pretty freaking rich, as most Persians are. And I think because it's so hard for Iranians to get here, most of the ones that do get here tend to be pretty well off. So, I mean, she was from Montgomery County, which was at the time still the wealthiest county in the country, or the second, but the wealthiest in Maryland at least. But it was at one time the wealthiest county in the country. And I don't think it's like the third or fourth wealthiest, but still up there. Um, but she would teach me to do bad stuff. Like she taught me how to cheat. She taught me how to cheat the parking meters on campus. So I would have people stay over with me for the weekend, and I would just jimmy the parking meter by. She taught me how to like take a nickel or a dime, wrap it up, and make a little a handle from like packaging tape, make a handle out of it with it attached to the coin, and I would just stick that in the parking meter and just keep jimmying it up and down until it completely maxed out the parking meter. And then the next day, so then the next morning, I would just go back out there and do it again. she there was some other bad stuff she was teaching me to do. The other stuff I wasn't going to do. I was cool with the parking meter thing because that helped a lot when I had guests come over and stay with me for the weekend. But some of the other stuff she was telling me to do, I'm like, nah, that's a little bit too much. A little too much, Vanessa. I don't mind using her name because people don't know who I'm talking about here, and I'm not using her last name. But anyway, and this was like 24 years ago, so yeah. Dirty Motor Oil says, "Do you ever get exhausted asking for forgiveness all the time? My friend teases me and says Christians are the most guilty. We are always needing forgiveness. My sin journal is full and keeps me busy. Help." What? I don't know. Who said I was Christian? I never said that. So it doesn't bother me because I don't have those problems. That would be, I mean, whom am I asking for forgiveness? He Man, Santa Claus, Snake Eyes, Voltron, Yogi the Bear. Okay. Jesus, right? Yeah, okay. Um, yeah, no. I can't relate. I don't have those problems. Even when I was Christian, I didn't feel any burden of sin on me. I don't I don't I don't have mental health problems, so I don't feel any psychological feelings of being dirty morally or sinful or whatever. I don't have those problems. I think people who do probably need to seek therapy or they need a hobby or get some pussy, something. Why would I keep a sin journal? Again, I'm not fucking Christian. I've made that clear throughout this whole live stream and throughout the past 2 weeks of all these religious discussions I've had. Never said I was Christian. What the fuck is a sin journal? I think you're trolling. You must be trolling because that just sounds stupid as fuck. I've never heard, growing up as a Christian, I've never heard of anyone keeping a sin journal. Like, that is some retarded ass shit. Never heard of it. And again, I think you're trolling or you just need mental help because I never fucking heard of it before. I don't keep any journals. First of all, then on top of that, from a legal perspective, you don't want to keep a journal of things that you did that were wrong because it can be used against you in the court of law. So take that for what that is. But, you know, I'm not a lawyer, but I would tell you this: you should not keep a record of things that you did that were possibly illegal because that journal or that record that you've kept of you doing things that were possibly illegal can be used against you in the court of law. This is why most politicians don't write, when they write biographies of, when they write their autobiographies, they don't put in those autobiographies crimes that they may have committed in the past. Or and most people who went to law school know better than to keep diaries. Yeah. And no, I definitely wasn't preaching. If you thought I was preaching, then I'm I'm sorry you were mistaken. I don't preach. But again, I've never heard of a sin journal. If any of you have ever heard of a sin journal, go ahead and put it in the chat room. Or if you're watching this on, if you're watching this broadcast on replay, go ahead and leave it in the comments that you've heard of sin journals or that you've kept a sin journal or you know someone that keeps a sin journal. Again, I've literally, until this guy mentioned that, I have never ever heard of that idea. It sounds profoundly stupid though. Because like I said, why would you keep Why would you keep a record of things that you've done that were wrong, since that can be used against you in a court of law? So yeah. Moving on. Um, as far as thinking about forgiveness and sin, I mean, that is not, while that is the most pronounced in Christianity, it, it has its it has its roots in Judaism before it, and and Islam also shares its uh, concepts of committing sin and all that sort of stuff as well. They may handle it. They may individually, those three faiths may individually handle the concept of sin differently, such as original sin, for instance, which of course I don't believe in. I think original sin was just a very good mind fuck. But um, getting back to Islam and whether it's inherently violent, like I said, I think there is something. Although, like I said, I'm not. Although I'm reticent to say that it is inherently violent, there is something about its doctrines that do lead to some people being uh, disposed to being radicalized. And again, like I said, I think that's a bi-directional arrow. I think on one hand, you have people who are more disposed to embracing radical beliefs, um, uh, becoming Muslim, and on the other hand, I think that the doctrines of that faith um, can radicalize people. So I think there's a bi-directional causal arrow with that. Um, but as far as it being inherently violent, again, I can't really say that because, like I said, you look at um, early Judaism, it was quite violent. When you look at medieval Christianity, it was very violent. There were like I said, between the Crusades, the Reformation, the witch hunts, the Inquisition, um, the the worldly conquest. Um, Christianity was very violent. It would have been it would have been more akin to thinking that Christianity was inherently violent, even though their founder was supposed to be like the Prince of Peace. um, I mean, not their founder, but you know what I mean. They're well, yeah, the founder of the church himself, Christ. Um, but but maybe maybe the better question is not whether Islam is inherently violent, but are Western religions inherently violent as compared to like maybe the Eastern religions, which don't share the same history of bloodshed in its name. And that's not to say that there have not been violent adherents to the different faiths of the Eastern religions, because there certainly has, and there still are right now. Like in places now like Burma, you have violent you you have a bunch of violent Buddhists attacking Muslims. You didn't see that coming, did you? Yes. Excuse me. Violent Buddhists attacking Muslims. The the Rohingya. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. The Rohingya people, but people people don't see that. They don't pay attention to that because it doesn't have the same racial element as talking about the Jewish versus uh, the Palestinians, where the white people are supposed to be the bad guys and the brown people are supposed to be the good guys. In Burma, they're both the same, you know, the same brown people, just of different faiths. But this time it goes against the narrative because it's the Buddhists beating up on the Muslims. Um, but yeah, I do think, but again, I do think there is something that's a bit radical in Islamic faith, especially Sharia law. Uh, Apparently, you know, Japan shut down some Muslims in Japan that wanted to um, practice a more fundamental version of the religion, and I think that's the part. I think that is the part where we might say it is inherently violent, is the fundamental Muslims, as apart from the more moderate ones, the ones who embrace a more fundamental um, interpretation of the faith do tend to be more violent. They're they're the ones who are more accepting of Sharia, more willing to punish people as heretics that don't embrace the faith, particularly in Muslim dominated countries. Um, what's up, Joseph? And there, there are several Islamic theocracies across the Middle East and North Africa, and even in Southeast Asia. So I don't know. What do you do? Um, and then the 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 facts on the ground contradict what they say, that they're not inherently violent, that this is a caricature of them. Yet, if these places were so great, why are they all running off to Europe or to America when they have their own countries that they run by the laws that they think should be should govern every country, which is Sharia law? So when you have your own country and it is largely under Sharia law, then why are you fleeing those countries? Right. So, and this was sort of my problem with African immigrants who come to the U.S. and try to diss Black Americans, is like, for all the stuff they say about us, you guys have your own countries and you can't get your shit together. The country is run by people who are of your who are of your own ilk, who look exactly like you, have your same history, and you can't get it together in your own countries. But then you want to come to other people's countries and then try to talk trash. It's like, fix your own country before you do that. And so, sort of the same thing. So I sort of have the same criticism of people of the Islamic faith who come to Europe or to America and criticize how things are done there. It's like, well, you always have the leisure to go back to your own country and fix what's wrong there, because apparently if what you believe is so correct, then your country shouldn't be shitholes. Like, if you have a country that's already a Muslim theocracy, um, then it's pretty much run the way you would like, but yet you flee to these other countries to to um, enjoy to enjoy the economic and personal freedoms of that country, but then you want to impose the same laws and cultural norms that you fleed from in your in your native land in these new countries. That to me doesn't make sense. And it shows a very radicalized mindset that you can only think one way, even if that way is counterproductive. But no, so where I won't so where I sit with this is I don't think Islam is inherently violent, but I think that it is. But I do think that the doctrines of in Islam do predispose people to accept more radical beliefs, especially the more fundamental sect of Islam. Where you have to have a beard. You have to do X, Y, and Z. Like Ramadan, like I could never do Ramadan. I was talking to some chick once, and she, I, she was saying something, and I was like, "Well, yeah, I gotta get up." I said, "Well, I'm not gonna be up that late." I said, "I'd like to get up early to work out." She was like, "Oh, well, good for you." I'm like, the fuck that's supposed to mean? I was like, "Don't get mad at me because you're like chubby." um, and so I even asked her out of respect. I was like, "Well, what should I doing?" I was like, "When you're doing Ramadan, what should I not ask of you that might be haram or whatever?" She was like, "No." She was like, "Just we don't eat or drink water um through during Ramadan." And I was like, "Okay, cool." But the other thing was she was a leftist, and I find it so fucking funny that someone can be a Muslim and a progressive. Like, how does that fucking work in your head? Only in America and probably in Western Europe too can you be so fucking retarded that you're a progressive, liberal, and Muslim, because you can't in those Muslim countries they don't accept those liberal views on feminism and abortion and LGBTQ and all that bullshit. No, I find that so hilarious. But she was just a typical American female American retard, which is why I say um, don't ever marry one of them. But that's a story for another day. Yeah, I'm about to end this because I actually thought because of the spiciness of this topic that it was going to attract a lot more people. But all I seem to be getting is a bunch of you know trolls or people who didn't even look at the topic. So there's no point in me dragging this out with a bunch of morons. So in any case, unless someone appears in the next minute or two, like I said, I don't find Islam inherently violent, but I think the doctrines of Islam do predispose people to accepting radical beliefs. And I think, particularly in those lands in the Middle East and North Africa, I think people who are already predisposed to accepting radical beliefs, usually out of the trauma of living in some of those regions, war torn regions, and refugee camps, and places that where they may have lost loved ones due to um, warring with Americans or Israel. It's gonna they're already radicalized or predisposed to it, and they jump onto not just Islam itself, but to some of them these militarized militarized factions, whether you're talking about Al Qaeda and ISIS and the Taliban and a bunch of these other there's a bunch of other ones out there. Those are just the three that people know, but there are several factions of uh, Islamic terrorism throughout North Africa and the Middle East, and even in West Africa, and even in the Philippines. There's a there's a group connected to ISIS in the Philippines. Yeah, in the southern part of the Philippines, not in the nicer parts. They're usually in the little parts in the southern Philippines that's more jungle like, less is lesser developed than, you know, places like Luzon and and parts of the Visayas, and even parts of Mindanao, because all of Mindanao gets a bad name, but not all of Mindanao is radicalized. Just this specific portions of it is really bad that no Americans should go to, and even some Filipinos from up north probably shouldn't go either, because there's these semi-autonomous regions of the Philippines way down in the south that are apart from the national government. They have like their own, like they're part of the Philippines, but they're like semi-autonomous. Like they still use the same currency and and stuff like that, but they have their own sort of government leaders apart from the Philippine national government, and you'll find there are some terrorist factions down there. Uh, we send we send American special forces and other special operation units there to help counter some of these rebel forces in that part of the Philippines fighting against the national government. And our U.S. Army Special Forces help train some of the Philippine military there in tactics to deal with those rebel forces, as well as with China. So, um, but again, I won't say that the faith itself is inherently violent. I just think that its doctrines are still steeped in the Middle Ages, and it does tend to promote a more radical mindset amongst people who are easily impressionable, and its doctrines can be easily abused and manipulated by charismatic leaders for political purposes. And then, like I said, with all the the with all the bad history of geopolitics there, that it doesn't help. Like I said, it doesn't help if you lived in a small town, um, and when you were little, you saw President Obama sending his drones into your town that wiped out people who were most likely just innocent bystanders. Um, it didn't help we've had these when you know when one president or another, whether you're talking about Biden or Obama or Bush, um, approved these surges in Iraq and Afghanistan to counter the these factions we were fight against at the time. And again, it might have been your family or some loved ones or people you knew that were wiped out who may or may have not been innocent, but nonetheless, it hits home for you, and that would probably already make you uh, want some get back out of vengeance. And then you see some people come into your town with guns and stuff, and they they give you a more positive self image of people who look like you, just older and presumably wiser, but not necessarily so. and you go off and join them and embrace their beliefs. Um, and like I said, I think it's so. Like I said, I think part of it is that the doctrines of Islam have not grown with the times. A lot of their doctrines are still steeped in the in the 16th century, whereas Christendom has largely had its bloody feuds and has evolved and moved on. But like I said, Christendom in the Middle Ages, I think would have been worse than Islam, but it evolved, and Islam has not gotten to that point where it's evolved past its more feudal origins the way Christianity has and the way Judaism did. Islam has yet to reach that point, but I won't say it's inherently violent because I don't know I don't know any Muslims in my personal life on an anecdotal level that embrace violence. Now I know some who embrace some radical. I know some that embrace fundamental uh, Islamic beliefs and are a bit radical in their mindset, but none of them I know have or probably would be willing to do any violence unless they were coerced to do so. Where, like I said, if you lived in North Africa or the Middle East, you would be more likely to be coerced to do so, especially if you already accept those fundamental beliefs. Um, but anywho, a little disappointed that I didn't get a lot of feedback on this. I just knew I would on something as spicy, potentially spicy as this sort of topic. And maybe when people see this on replay, I will get some spicy comments in the comment section. And again, if people wanted to join in on the conversation, I wasn't going to criticize people because of the sensitive nature of this. I know there's going to be like strong feelings on both sides of this. Um, the only people I was like really roasting in my comments were just people who were coming in here trolling and leaving comments that literally had nothing to do with the topic whatsoever. Like I would welcome people having strong feelings about the topic as opposed to people leaving little idiotic comments that had nothing to do with it. So, but that's how this is sometimes. So um, I will be back later. I'm not going to stay on here and drag this out anymore. I'm pretty sure if I stayed on later it would, but I'm not staying up late to do that. So I'm out, folks. Um, have a good one. Peace.